History of Black Excellence. The Scottsboro Boys. Injustice in Alabama. Blood and Iron. In the spring of 1931, a freight train cut through the heart of Alabama, steel wheels grinding over tracks that carried not just cargo but the weight of a nation's conscience. Aboard that train were 9 young black men, teenagers, poor, hopeful, searching for work in the Great Depression. Before that train reached its next stop, their lives would be stolen by fear, by hatred, and by lies. March 25, 1931. A Southern Railroad freight rolled toward Memphis. On board were 9 black youths: Clarence Norris, Charlie Weems, Haywood Patterson, Ozzie Powell, Olin Montgomery, Eugene Williams, Willie Robertson, and brothers Roy and Andy Wright, ages 13 to 19. They were riding the rails in search of work, freedom, and possibility. A fight broke out with a group of white boys. Knives flashed. Fists flew. The white boys were thrown off the train. Humiliated, they ran to the nearest station and cried, "Assault!" The train stopped at Paint Rock, Alabama. Sheriffs were waiting with dogs and shotguns. 9 boys were dragged from the cars and beaten. Then came the accusation that sealed their fate. 2 white women, Victoria Price and Ruby Bates, claimed the boys had raped them. No investigation, no evidence. Their word was treated as law. Within 15 days, the boys were indicted, tried, and nearly condemned. The Scottsboro courthouse overflowed. The National Guard stood watch, not to protect justice, but to contain a mob's fury. Their court-appointed lawyers were unprepared. One admitted he hadn't spoken to most of the defendants. Another told the jury he wasn't sure of their innocence, but it was his duty to defend them. No credible evidence, no meaningful defense. Yet 8 were sentenced to death by electric chair. Only the youngest, 13-year-old Roy Wright, escaped execution when one juror refused to kill a child. Outside, the crowd cheered. Inside, 9 boys stared at the floor. The world was watching. News of Scottsboro spread across the country and beyond. For many, it exposed the failure of Southern justice. For others, it tested whether the Constitution meant what it said. 2 organizations stepped forward: the NAACP and the Communist Party's legal arm, the International Labor Defense. The ILD acted first. They saw more than defendants. They saw a system on trial. In 1932, the case reached the United States Supreme Court in Powell versus Alabama. The court ruled the boys had been denied effective counsel, a violation of the 14th Amendment. It was a historic victory, but Alabama retried the boys again and again. And again, the verdict came back: guilty. In 1933, the truth began to surface. Ruby Bates recanted. She said no rape had occurred. She said the accusation was invented to avoid charges of vagrancy and prostitution. She returned to testify and faced jeers and threats. Victoria Price refused to recant. Calm, unflinching, she repeated her story, knowing her skin color gave it power. Despite Bates's confession, convictions continued. One man, Judge James E. Horton, stood up. He set aside a guilty verdict, writing that justice must not be governed by the cry of the multitude. It was an act of courage. It cost him his career. By now, the Scottsboro Boys had become a national symbol. Across America, and even in London, people marched. Tens of thousands demanded freedom for the 9. Letters poured into the White House. Eleanor Roosevelt urged fairness. President Roosevelt refused to intervene. Years passed in prison cells. Some escaped. Some died. Some were freed only to face new trials and more punishment. Haywood Patterson wrote from behind bars. Even locked away, he said, truth still lived in him. Scottsboro reshaped American law. Powell versus Alabama confirmed the right to effective counsel. Norris versus Alabama struck down the exclusion of black jurors. Those rulings cracked open a door that civil rights lawyers would later walk through. But for the 9, justice came late. Decades lost, families broken, hope eroded. In 2013, 82 years after the arrests, the last 3 were posthumously pardoned. A descendant said quietly, "They called them criminals, but history calls them courageous." The story of the Scottsboro Boys is testimony. 9 children boarded a train seeking opportunity and met a nation unwilling to see their humanity. Their ordeal forced the Constitution to keep its promise. Their suffering became a seed of future justice. This is history of black excellence, Remember their names. Remember their courage. The tracks they rode still run through this country's heart.